Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, for the people who download the show, today is signing day, the early signing day for the Ohio State Buckeyes and everybody else in college football. And Tom, what did you think about the whole Zach Harrison thing? Huh? Pretty crazy, right?
Okay, we'll do two takes. Ready? First take. Wow, I can't believe they got Zach Harrison. That's so amazing. That's incredible. What a huge get. Okay, take two. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that he went to some other school. I don't think he's going to be very good anyway. Okay, good. So we'll just, go ahead and mentally edit that in for whatever you guys, whatever happens with Zach Harrison. You guys can just mentally edit in whatever the correct take was there.
Right. Choose your own adventure. So just to clarify, just so you guys understand, we are recording Monday evening because Tuesday evening when we normally record, there is a basketball game. So we'll be busy with that, which means that we don't really yet know. I mean, we got a pretty good idea of what's going to happen, and everything that happens, we will pretty much have assumed that was going to happen. But so if we miss something or don't get to mention something, it's because it hasn't happened yet, basically. And as much as we can see into the future, we can't see everything into the future. But as far as we can see, there are most of the guys committed to Ohio State do plan on signing on signing day. Now, Jordan Battle is still listed as a commit, but I don't think anybody expects him to end up at Ohio State. Everybody expects him to pretty much end up at Alabama at this point. So I think, Tom, are you with me? He's like out of the picture by now.
Yeah, I think that this is very much like the Emory Jones situation last year where you went into signing day where technically he's still a member of the class, but you knew he was going somewhere else. I mean, I think there is a very, very small chance that Jordan Battle ends up a Buckeye, but I don't. It certainly does not sound like that is the most likely outcome for Wednesday by a wide margin.
So I think the only two commits that won't be planning on signing Sunday are running back Steel Chambers out of Georgia and offensive lineman Doug Nestor out of West Virginia. Nestor, I believe, was at Penn State this weekend, taking a look around, which he said he would do. And he'll, continue to look at Ohio State as well. This was to be expected, not just specifically Nestor, but for recruits to reopen a little bit with the departure of Urban Meyer, and we've seen that with the 2020 guys as well. So that's not unexpected. The rest of those guys should fall in line, but of course the big news will be what we've already been talking about, and that's Zach Harrison, who is expected to announce around noon. He will tweet it. He will unlock his Twitter account because, like we've always been telling you, he's a very private kid, doesn't really get into this whole thing. So he will grace us with an unlocked Twitter account. We'll tweet out his announcement around noon. And then at 2 p.m.-ish, we will be at Ohio State to speak with Ohio State head coach Ryan Day, who will be handling that day's festivities. And here's where I'm thinking right now, Tom. Here's where I've been on Zach Harris. Maybe like 5-6 months ago, and from that point on, all the way back, I assumed he would be a Buckeye. Then, like, Penn State creeped in there, and then Michigan was looking like the team to beat for a while. Now, like, the guys who cover OSU recruiting are thinking it's between Penn State and Ohio State again. And if Zach Harrison has already said no to Penn State mentally and already said no to Michigan mentally, but has now come back to Penn State, Tom, I keep wondering why he won't say yes to Ohio State. And this makes me think that Ohio State's going to have to work really hard in these last 48 hours, 36 hours to convince him that he needs to be a Buckeye.
Yeah, I think that there's a decent chance that they can convince him. I don't think that I don't know that I would say it's even 50-50 yet, but I think it's well within the realm of possibility, which, considering where this recruitment stood a month ago, is a huge win for Ohio State. Because, I mean, like you said, earlier this summer, it looked for all the world like he was going to be a Buckeye. His crystal ball was 100% Ohio State. Every indication was he was going to Ohio State. And then he had, I think he visited Michigan in late June and kind of went, and then sort of started wavering. And in a rare interview with reporters down, I think it might have been at the opening, somewhere in Texas, he talked about, he'd never been more confused about what he wanted to do. And he had planned to announce in August. And we said, don't worry about it. Unless he delays that announcement, don't worry about it. And then once he delayed that announcement, it was like, okay, now go ahead and press the panic button a little bit if you are so inclined. And then as the fall went on, it seemed more and more and more like he was headed toward Michigan, to the point where it seemed almost a foregone conclusion. And then it sounds like watching the Michigan defense giving up 62 points to Ohio State might have swung him back away from Michigan again. So, I think that the change in coaching staff at Ohio State may play a role. If Ryan Day can get him comfortable with the Ryan Day era, that might help. If Larry Johnson can convince him that he's coming back for another year or multiple years, that would probably help. But I think anyone who tells you that they know what he's going to do is lying to you. We have had on the record and off the record conversations with people, and everyone kind of goes, "Yeah, I think this is what he's going to do," but no one really knows. And there are people who are normally the people who would know about this stuff, and they're saying opposite things at the same time. So it is rare that there is real legitimate drama with a recruitment like this, especially one this high profile. But this is a really, truly intriguing decision.
Yeah, and the coaches, I would assume, don't know yet, because as soon as coaches find out, then we find out, through various back channels. So, this has been a pretty fantastically tight-lipped process all around. And you look at, there's some upheaval at Michigan right now, which maybe has turned him off. And I think Greg Mattis, the defensive line coach there, has the same issue as Larry Johnson here, where you don't know how long they'll be around. And we assume Penn State has been mentioning that fact to defensive linemen in the past. So it wouldn't be surprised if that is also happening with Zach Harrison. Could Larry Johnson tell him, yeah, I'm going to be here at least another 2 years? Is that enough to convince Zach Harrison that this Ohio State is where he wants to be? I think the proof in what Ohio State can turn their defensive ends into, we talked about that last week, compared to Michigan, is a strong sell. Penn State has that as well. They put guys in the NFL, and James Franklin is an outstanding recruiter. So it's just interesting that we are now talking like it's Ohio State and Penn State. The recruiting guys, it's almost like they can't tell you where he's going to go at this moment, but they can tell you where they don't think he will end up. And then you go process of elimination from there. And it's really bizarre to have guys who, they talk to everybody that they can, and they have differing opinions, which just tells you how close of a race and how quiet all of this is being kept. But who knows? By the time you're listening to this, maybe it's all water under the bridge, and we'll know exactly where he ended up. Or maybe, Tom, maybe he'd stretch it into March or April, like Terrell Pryor did. That would be awesome.
That would be awesome. I don't get the sense that the motivations here from a personal standpoint are maybe the same motivations that Terrell Pryor had back in 2008. That would have been. I think Terrell Pryor may have enjoyed the spotlight a little more than Zach Harrison does, maybe exactly polar opposites. So maybe, I'm gonna guess that will probably not be the case here. But I don't remember where this was. I recently saw a conspiracy theory that Terrell Pryor intentionally dragged out his recruitment to keep Michigan from signing a quarterback in that class, that first Rich Rodriguez class, to completely hose Michigan, because then they only had Stephen Threet and I don't remember who else. Nick Sheridan in that first year, and so that completely set the Michigan program back a year and set Rodriguez on this basically death spiral as Michigan's coach. So I think
that's amazing.
I think that's probably giving Terrell Pryor a little too much credit, but that was that was certainly an interesting conspiracy theory. I think I might have seen that on Twitter somewhere. It was pretty recently. Like, why are you digging this up 10 years later? But that was one I had not heard before, but it was a pretty good one.
That is almost worthy of getting your name up on like Ohio Stadium, like Smith, Willis, Harley, Pryor. Like, why did Terrell Pryor get it? Well, let us tell you why he got it. He totally hosed Michigan out of a quarterback in a recruiting class and pretty much sealed the fate of their head coach and set the program back, a decade or whatever. I mean, we call Troy Smith like the Wolverine Slayer, but Troy Smith only slayed Michigan for a few years. Terrell Pryor set him back a decade, so give that guy his props and his tattoos and whatever else he wants. He's earned them, well earned, and truly an Ohio State all-time great for that alone. He could have never stepped on the field for the Buckeyes, and if you do that to Michigan, you might. It's time to retire that number. Nobody else should be wearing 2 unless they also are going to wreck an entire program. It could be Michigan, it could be Michigan State. Nobody cares about Penn State. But, wreck like a program that's meaningful. And, we talked last week about who should get statues in Buckeye Grove or trees there. And you might want to give something to Terrell Pryor for what he did for Ohio State. By committing to the Buckeyes and leaving Michigan out hanging. That's a pretty spectacular theory. I will adopt that, and let's make that fact right now. Tom, would you second that?
I don't know how else you would explain the fact that Terrell Pryor is so universally beloved by Ohio State fans and has been for one consecutive decade now. So I don't know how else you would possibly explain that. So yeah, there you go. It must be fact.
All right. So let's move on then. Back to recruiting. If you look at the class right now, the areas of strength, they got their quarterback in DeJuan Mathis. They got 2 running backs in Steele Chambers and was it Marcus Crowley?
Correct.
Is that right?
Yes.
Out of Florida. You've got the receivers, Garrett Wilson, Jameson, Williams. It's, offensively there, the skill positions, they also got the tight end with Cormonte Hamilton. The skill positions look fine. I wouldn't be surprised to maybe see another wide receiver come along at some point. Offensive line, I think, is the concern with Doug Nestor. But you've got Ryan Jacoby. You've got Harry Miller, the 5-star center. I don't know, at this point, it looks like Nicholas Petit-Frere will be a redshirt freshman next year. Not that we're talking about him for 5 years. But offensively, they look to have solidified or at least gotten what they need with only a handful more spots left open. Do you see any areas of concern offensively?
I think for sure the offensive line is a concern because you have 2 guys in the class right now. Nestor is theoretically still in the class, but like you said, was at Penn State last week, still looking at Georgia, still looking at Virginia Tech. He was supposed to sign in December and enroll at Ohio State in January. He's now pushed that back. He'll sign in February and enroll over the summer. So he was the first guy to sign to verbal to this class. He verbaled over a year ago. He was back in 2017. He said he wanted to be a Buckeye, was a lifelong Buckeye fan. I know you've talked to him, and seems by all accounts to be a very good kid, very good prospect. It would be, just a guy that Ohio State would have really loved to have on that line. You cannot afford to take a small offensive line class 2 years in a row, which is what they're going to be doing, because you've got, I mean, Harry Miller, I think, is probably a future star. Ryan Jacoby, a very nice piece on the line. He seems like he'll slot in somewhere along the line and should be in the 2 deep in a year or two. But you have to have a third player, because last year they only signed Nicholas Petit-Frere, Matthew Jones, and Max Ray. So if they only have 5 offensive linemen in 2 classes, that is when, in 2020 or 2021, all of a sudden they can't run the ball because 2 of those guys haven't panned out and one of them is hurt, and all of a sudden you're playing a bunch of true freshmen in the offensive line, and that's when disaster strikes. That's when you have a season where the perennial power program suddenly has a real down year, and it's like, why can't they run the ball this year? Why can't they, why isn't the offense doing anything? Well, you have to have depth along your offensive line. Ohio State ran into this in the late Jim Tressel era, where they'd have, the starting left tackle was also the backup right guard, and the starting right guard was also the backup left guard, and it was like, we have 7 adult humans on this campus that we feel comfortable can play offensive line at the Division I level. And if any of them is hurt, we're completely hosed. You can't get in that spot. Of all the stuff that sank the Rich Rod era, offensive line recruiting was actually a big one at Michigan. Like they had a couple classes where they just didn't take enough kids. And if like 1 or 2 of them doesn't pan out, you're in a world of hurt. And offensive line is a tough position to evaluate. That is a place where you have a lot of washouts. If you go back over the last few years of the Urban Meyer era at Ohio State, there are a lot of offensive linemen that came in reasonably highly recruited and who ended up playing for Duke or Cincinnati or Kansas, or just transferring out because they just couldn't hack it at the Ohio State level. So if you only have 5 recruits come in on the line in this 2-year span, and you have a couple guys who suddenly can't play at that level, then your margin for error is real thin. They really have to get Nestor, or they have to get another offensive lineman. I know there was a guy from Illinois who was looking at, I'm blanking on the name. Yeah. I keep thinking Keegan, but he's the one who's going to Michigan. A guy who was looking at was committed to Ole Miss, but was thinking about coming to the Buckeyes. It looks like he's going to stick with his Ole Miss commit. They need to find another offensive lineman. You can't have 5 recruits, five offensive linemen sign in a 2-year span. You are setting yourself up for disaster a year or 2 down the line.
And there's Dayton Dunbar, offensive lineman Jonathan Allen, still out there, which is like, why hasn't he committed at this point? But if you don't get more guys, you're going to have to start reaching in one class. You're going to have to take 5 or 6, which gets dangerous, because you look back at like the 2015 class, they signed 5 guys, 5 offensive linemen. A 6th ended up being Joshua Allaby, who switched from defensive tackle. But that's a class with Brandon Bowen, who has dealt with injuries, Kevin Feeder, who dealt with injuries and is gone, Grant Schmidt, who I think maybe stayed around for a spring before leaving. There was Matthew Burrell, who transferred this past spring, and Isaiah Prince. So that's a big class, but really you get 1.5 starters out of it in Prince and Brandon Bowen. And that's quite a few swings with very little contact. And if they don't bring in another couple of guys this year, if they can, Nestor and Allen would be a pretty good close, for where they are right now. And it looks like, just based on the crystal balls, like Darnell Wright out of Huntington, West Virginia is looking, Tennessee is his leader apparently. And that was the guy that a lot of Buckeye fans were hoping would end up at Ohio State. He's waiting until February, so we'll see what happens there. But defensively, there's just 1 defensive lineman in the class right now, in Noah Potter, assuming Cade Stover doesn't eventually grow into a defensive end. And it's interesting watching his high school film. He's plays linebacker, plays some sort of hybrid safety as well, and kind of reminds you a little bit of Sam Hubbard in that regard. But just one, and maybe Craig Young develops into a defensive end. I don't know, but there's not a lot of guys out there. There's Javonte Jean-Baptiste will redshirt this year, which will help add depth to. I think a lot of Ryan Day's first class, 2019 class, will be the redshirt guys in 2018. That'll give it, maybe gussy it up a little bit. But there's not a lot of defensive line depth in this class. There is no depth in this class, but there's also not a lot of guys still out there. A couple of 3-star defensive tackles maybe, but for me, the defensive line, although, they brought in some very good guys last year, but you kind of want to keep doing that. Urban Meyer has never been like, no, we got Noah Spence last year. We don't need Joey Bosa this year. I mean, he would load up. And so kind of a disappointing haul compared to what they normally do on the defensive line this year.
That's true, just in pure numbers. I mean, Noah Potter's a defensive end, so that'll be that's a nice. I mean, he's a 4-star prospect. He'll be a nice fit for them. You have the potential to add Zach Harrison on Wednesday. If you add him, then that papers over a whole lot of holes in the class. And there's a defensive tackle from North Carolina by the name of Jaden McKenzie, who looks like he's going to come down to Ohio State versus North Carolina as a recruiting battle. He's supposed to announce again this week on Wednesday, so you will know on him about the time you're listening to this probably. He certainly seems like he's trending towards Ohio State. You add him, that's a nice get. Add another big body in the middle. But there's a little bit less of a concern on the defensive line than there is on the offensive line, just because last year's defensive line haul was so big. Last year they brought in 3 defensive tackles, if you include the JUCO Antoine Jackson, and they brought in 4 defensive ends last year, because they brought in Tyler Friday, Tyreek Smith, Javonte Jean-Baptiste, and Alex Williams. And even if not all of those guys pan out, that's such a big class that you can afford to take a little bit of a smaller class the next year. You got to have another decent sized class next year. But you can, if you have 7 defensive linemen one year, 6 of them are freshmen, you can take a little bit of a smaller class, because Friday and Tyreek Smith played this year extensively. Alex Williams and Javonte Jean-Baptiste are redshirt. I know Tommy Togiai and Teron Vincent both played quite a bit as defensive tackles, so they're not going to redshirt. Antoine Jackson had already redshirted, so he can't redshirt. But you've got 2 defensive ends who are going to be redshirt freshmen next year. You add Potter on top of that. You add potentially like a Jaden McKenzie. You add, if you add a Zach Harrison, then Larry Johnson's going to be smiling from ear to ear on Wednesday. But it's a little bit less of a concern depth wise at defensive line. But that means if you take a small class this year, you gotta go back and take a decent sized class next year.
I also think Alex Williams could be a swing guy who could end up on the offensive line as well, depending on where the depth is. There's no cornerbacks in this class, assuming Jordan Battle leaves, which is a very odd situation, given that Kerry Combs used to say one of his jobs was to go out and get the 2 best cornerbacks every single year and sign them. And now that didn't always happen, but they usually brought in at least 2 corners. This year, they're going to have to. There's really nobody seriously out there that looks like they're headed for Ohio State or leaning towards Ohio State or even leaning towards leaning. But you do have Tyreek Johnson, I believe, will redshirt. He was like 3 games played as of a couple of weeks ago. Cameron Brown played 5 games. Sevyn Banks was playing 4 games as of a couple of weeks ago, so I believe he's probably burned his shirt, possibly. Maybe Marcus Hooker ends up a corner. Maybe Amir Reap moves back to corner if they need it, but I also don't think they want to reach on a corner, because what's the point? If they can't play here, they're just going to run him out of town, or he'll just be taking up a spot that they don't need him taking up. But there's also, there's a bunch of 2020 corners that are looking hard at Ohio State. So even if they strike out in 2019, I could see a 3 or 4 cornerback class in 2020 of guys who are all top 10 corners. But it's still, Tom, a bit of a surprise to see no corners in this class.
Yeah, I definitely do not think that was the plan going in, that they decided, no, we don't need a corner this year. Like, I think it's corner is very much like quarterback and running back. Like, you gotta take a kid every year, at least one, maybe two, to make sure you don't have a hole in your depth chart. Because you can add a couple guys next year, but those guys are true freshmen in 2020. And Jeff Okuda is draft eligible next year. Sean Wade is draft eligible next year. You know, we don't know yet whether Kendall Sheffield or Damon Arnett is going to be back for 2019, but either way, they're certainly not going to be back for 2020, I think. So you're getting down pretty far down the depth chart at that point to, you know, Marcus Williamson is, you know, someone who they would potentially have back, Tyreek Johnson, Seven Banks, but there's not a whole lot behind those guys after that. So, you know, and you don't really want to be putting true freshman corners out there. That's not generally a recipe for a good season, is, you know, true freshman corners out there. So the 2020 guys are great long-term, but that doesn't solve the 2020 issue. So I think there, and maybe in the offensive line area, they may be looking at a grad transfer this time next year, or even over the summer, because if you have scholarships open, I have not done a full scholarship count yet, but, you know, if Ohio State has, you know, 5 to 7 guys declare early for the draft, and you have a couple guys transfer, and you're only signing a class of 19-ish, then you may have a couple open scholarships over the summer, and so maybe you can go out and find a, you know, grad transfer offensive lineman or a grad transfer corner, or, you know, someone like that to just kind of help paper over those holes a little bit short term. In the same way that people used to do that with JUCOs, maybe you can do that with a grad transfer now.
Well, and we've seen them do that with JUCOs, with Kendall Sheffield, with Malcolm Pridgeon, who, well, you know, took a little bit longer than anticipated, but that could also be another way they go. Are there any reaches in this class? And I think it's impossible to know that right now. When we say reach, all you do is you scroll to the bottom of the class and you look at like the couple of lowest ranked guys. Bryson Shaw, the safety out of Dwayne Haskins' old school, the Bola School in Potomac, Maryland, the number 47 safety in the nation, number 571 player overall according to the composite, was originally committed to Wisconsin, I believe, but the Buckeyes flipped him in the spring. You've got Craig Young, who earned his offer in one of the camps this summer, out of Fort Wayne, 6'4", 200 pounds. I don't even think they don't even know what he's going to be yet, but you let him grow into whatever it's going to be. So with reaches, Bryson Shaw, 6'2" safety, they saw enough in the spring, or, you know, from his film and just getting to know him. And Urban has said he likes the job of evaluation that Michigan State does and Wisconsin does. And so we'll see how that turns out. I don't usually ever have a problem with the camp offers, because they see these players and they put them through their paces and they ask them to do stuff. And I think there's something intriguing about Craig Young, because, I mean, is he a wide receiver? Is he a linebacker? Is he a safety? Is he a defensive end? I guess, you know, he all they know is he's something, and we'll figure it out. Maybe won't figure it out for a while. That's, you know, Malik Harrison did that. Darren Lee did that. Chris Worley did that, where you don't necessarily know what they're going to be. You just know that, you know what, I'd like them to be that, whatever it is here at Ohio State. The Cormatze Hamilton story, you know, taking a Greyhound to Ohio State to Friday Night Lights, I believe, to get his offer or whatever. So those are like the 3 lowest kids. I don't know that any of them, they may all be reaches, but Tom, it's really too early, and we're just going based off of their camp appearances and their recruiting rankings.
Right. And you can't judge based solely on recruiting rankings. I mean, in general, they are a very good barometer. I mean, you want to have a higher ranked class than a lower ranked class. In general, 5-star kids are going to pan out to be all conference players, or, All-Americans or first-round NFL draft picks at a much higher rate than 4 stars, and then in turn at a much higher rate than 3 stars. So, I mean, it's something that's worth paying attention to, but there are always exceptions at every level. There are 5 stars who are going to pan out. There are 3 stars who are going to turn into All-Americans. That's just how it works because it's an imprecise business. I'm going to read real quickly through the bottom of the 2015 class for Ohio State. So this was a class that had 26 players. I'm going to read from the bottom of the list up. Liam McCullough, who has been a long snapper starter for Ohio State for 4 seasons. Devon Hamilton, who is a rotation defensive tackle who has been an impact player for the team this year. Rashad Berry, starting tight end. Damon Arnett, starting cornerback. Josh Alabi, backup left tackle who has played well in the duty that they've had him play. And Brandon Bowen, who was a starter last year and then had the leg injury or otherwise probably would have been a starter this year. So that's the bottom 6 players out of a 26-player class that all turned into good to very good players for Ohio State for the last few years. And those guys were all 3-star players ranked below number 500 overall in the class. So you never know. And it's certainly too early to write anyone off as a reach or anything like that. I think you can think of those guys maybe as projects, and Craig Young in particular. Like you said, he is basically he is a big block of granite, and they've got to figure out what they want to carve him into the next few years. And you won't know probably for 2 to 3 years with him. And you can have 1 or 2 of those guys in a class, and it's not a problem at all. Those are guys who a lot of times, like you said, Darren Lee is the kind of prototypical example at Ohio State. He was a 3-star quarterback at New Albany High School, and all of a sudden, what was it, 3-4 years later, he's a first-round NFL outside linebacker draft pick. So that is not a straight line there from A to B. And that took, and Darren Lee very famously had to camp at Ohio State a couple times, and Luke Fickell really had to go to bat for him to get Urban Meyer to offer him a scholarship. So, you never know what these guys, when you have a class that's made up of 12 of those guys, that's when you probably have a problem. That's what a not very good recruiting class looks like. If you take a couple,
that's a MAC class.
Yeah, exactly. If you take a couple of those guys and you think, hey, this guy could be something. We have the luxury of letting him develop for a few years because we have other guys who can be immediate impact players. Give him a year or two to, sort of figure out where he wants to be, what he can be. And then, that you have the luxury of doing that and sitting back and waiting on a couple of those guys. You can't do it for half of your class. And Ohio State is certainly not doing that. But Craig Young plays wide receiver for his high school team. He could play defensive end for Ohio State. Like that's quite a jump, quite a leap in, on the field to go from wide receiver to potentially a defensive end. And he's not going to do it next year. He's not going to be a starting defensive end in 2019. But if he can get bigger, bulk up, and keep the quickness, keep the athleticism that he has right now, that could be quite a player down the road.
A lot of the guys that we're talking about are out of state, which has led a lot of people to wonder where the in-state guys are, and specifically, will Ryan Day focus more on Ohio prospects? And that was one of the things he said in his acceptance. I keep calling it acceptance speech. He didn't win an Oscar or anything. Like the introduction was, we're going to focus on Ohio. That's where we're going to start, which is the same thing Urban Meyer has always said. However, now I'm thinking they may start signing more Ohio kids, but it's because the national lure of Urban Meyer is gone, which means you're left choosing from more Ohio kids. And, some people may like that. Other people, obviously won't, because you're not getting necessarily the best guys. But if you look at the 2019 class, 4 of the top 5 guys in the state could be headed out of the state, and they all have Ohio State offers. So it's not like the Buckeyes aren't trying. It's just that, the players also have to cooperate. And that's not just being good enough or wanting to be Buckeyes. We've seen in the past where, there's been some really good players who haven't had new grades to even get an offer. So they end up at Iowa State or Kentucky or Michigan State. And whether they may pan out, they may not. But these are guys that could have been Buckeyes with better grades. And so when they don't sign those players, then Urban Meyer, Mark Pantoni get asked, why don't you sign more players? And they're like, well, we would like to, which is true. They would like to. But as Urban Meyer says so often, it's not the same getting into Ohio State as it was 30 years ago when, as long as you didn't let the drool hit your shoes, you could get into Ohio State. Now, like you can't even drool, Tom. You can't even drool, which is not fair, honestly.
I'm lucky I wasn't born 20 years later, I guess, is the moral of the story. Otherwise, I'd be doing a podcast on, I don't know, Ohio Bobcats football or Minnesota Gophers football or something.
So when we talk about getting more Ohio players, I do think there will be more Ohio players. I don't think it will be because the focus is higher on Ohio. I think it's just because that's where they'll have to come back to. But make no mistake, this is a national program that is seen from every state in the union. There are players who would look at Ohio State. Now, there has to be mutual interest for them to go too far west, like California, or they probably won't even go to Hawaii, although they did for the defensive tackle in terms of recruiting. But there has to be mutual interest for them to go too far west. Obviously, the East, the Midwest, the South, they're all, Texas, they're going to do that till the cows come home. But Ohio, the talent there, Tom, is more fitting. You get past like the top 6, 7, 8, where maybe every single year those guys could be Buckeyes. Past that, though, it's not like it used to be. And a lot of the people who say they want more Ohio players are from back then. Back when you could fill up, if you get 15 kids out of Ohio, then that's a top 15 program, year round. But you also have people who would not be happy with Ohio State being a top 15 program. It's supposed to be top 5. And I don't think you can do that with 10 kids from Ohio in every class.
No, I'm just looking right now through the 2020 class for Ohio, and you go through the top 5 players in Ohio are all top 300 players nationally. And that's it. 5 Ohio players are in the top 300 nationally. 12 are in the top 500 nationally. So that's a pretty, that if Ohio State is not going to sign a lot of guys who are, kind of 400 to 500 overall players, or they haven't at least been the last few years. So I'm just now to look back and compare to the 2004 class. I'm just kind of looking at one class in general. 2004, 4 of the top 66 players in the country were Ohio kids. So that was Ted Ginn, Fred Davis, the tight end who went to USC, Brandon Braxton, an offensive lineman who went to Oklahoma, and Marcus Freeman, linebacker, who went to Ohio State. That's 4 of the top 66. This year, there is 2 of the top 183. Two of the top 150 are Ohio kids. So, there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. Ohio kids are the lack of spring football, the lack of 7-on-7. Ohio kids tend to develop a little slower than kids in Texas, just for that reason. Just they don't get the reps because Ohio doesn't have spring football. So you have, later developing prospects and all that kind of stuff. So it is a lot more complicated to recruit in Ohio as Ohio State than it was back in Jim Tressel's day. Because if you throw out an offer to an Ohio kid, the odds are they're going to accept it. That's not, especially an early offer. If you're one of the first schools to offer and you're Ohio State, you get a pretty good chance of getting that kid. And that's great, except sometimes the players don't develop the way that you project them to. And then what do? Ohio State has run into that issue in the past pretty recently as well with a quarterback recruit who they, locked down as a freshman, who then didn't develop into the kind of player they wanted to, and then they kind of had to cut bait with him a little later on in his high school career, and that's kind of a messy situation, and you're sort of burning a bridge with an Ohio high school there. So it's more complicated than just go out and sign a whole bunch of Ohio players and everything will be better. There's a whole lot more that goes into it than just pulling up the 24/7 list for the state of Ohio and just calling the top 8 to 10 players on there and saying, "Hey, come here," and thinking your class is half full.
You alluded to Danny Clark, the quarterback that they got a commitment from as a freshman and then had to back away from him. His brother is Caden Clark, a 4-star, 3-star tight end in the 2020 class out of Akron. He is committed to Alabama. So there's repercussions from stuff like that. Losing, the number 10 player in the state according to the 24/7 in the 2020 class, you lose him basically because the family wants nothing to do with you. And, so that's why Urban Meyer has talked about it plenty of times. They get caught because they're trying not to screw up with these offers, and you want to see the kid as late as possible. And he's always lamenting the fact that you don't get to see Ohio kids as seniors. And because Ohio is such a popular state for prospects, teams are coming in all the time and offering them. And you saw that with Mitchell Trubisky. He fell in love with North Carolina, and Ohio State wouldn't go and work out for them. So it's just a tough situation when you're in a state where they do develop later, but plenty of other schools are willing to take that risk that Ohio State isn't. And now maybe if the national names aren't as prevalent, maybe they start to maybe reach a little bit, or not reach, but take more risks in state in terms of talent and development. They still can't really take those risks in terms of academics. Do you expect more Ohio kids under Ryan Day?
I think that they're probably going to have to shift their focus a little more internal, in state, in terms of who they're looking at, just for the reason that you mentioned. Until Ryan Day establishes himself, you are not going to have the Urban Meyer cachet to sell nationally. If Ryan Day comes out and wins the Big Ten next year and potentially gets them to the playoff, and they look just like they have in previous years, and they keep the recruiting machine rolling, then that may be a very short-term thing. But he's got to kind of show that he can keep doing it, because they're keeping the pieces of the recruiting machine in place. Mark Pantoni is still going to be here. All the staff's going to be here. You've got the same strength coach. You've got all the. They're not gonna tear down the fancy locker room in the WAC or anything like that. It's all going to look the same. You're still going to have 100,000 butts in the seats on Saturdays in Ohio Stadium. So they just have to establish that, yep, we are still the same program. We're not going to just go off a cliff here. And I think if they can do that, and you keep, like a Paris Johnson, who's the top 10 national player for 2020, who's committed to Ohio State, who's, kind of looking around right now and just sort of reevaluating things after Urban Meyer's retirement. If you can keep him on board and you can bring in a few more 2020 kids who are kind of highly recruited players from that class, I think you've got a pretty good chance to keep things rolling at something pretty closely approximating what Ohio State fans have come to expect recruiting wise.
Because even Jim Tressel would be able to bring in top 5 classes every now and again. It's just sometimes a smaller class would need to come in, and that would drop them down into rankings. So that's that's signing day. Hope everybody had a great signing day. Hope you got everything that you asked Santa for, particularly your 6'6", 245-pound defensive end who runs a 4.47. Hopefully you got that and you're happy about that. You know how to use it. Don't break it. All of that good stuff. So as all of these new players come in, we have old players leaving. Mike Weber announced, to nobody's surprise, that he is leaving for the NFL. I've had some people ask me, why wouldn't he stay and improve his stock? But for me, he's tapped out in terms of what he's going to be. There's no reason to come back because he's already shown everything that he is. I would expect possibly fewer carries for him next year. And he still has yet to play a season without dealing with injuries. So you need to get to the NFL as quickly as possible and start getting paid for getting beaten up. And I don't know that he's not going to get any faster, bigger, stronger, more elusive. He is what he is, and I think he can play in the NFL. I don't know that another year is going to make him more of anything. It's just going to prolong what everybody already knows. And so there's no reason, in my opinion, for him to come back, especially when you're not going to be the starter. You're probably going to start losing some carries to quarterbacks again, be it Matthew Baldwin or Tate Martell. J.K. Dobbins is still there. You don't want to go another year, Tom, just giving Master Teague, 17 carries or whatever he finished with this year. So there are going to be more touches to go around for the other guys. And this is just a perfect time for him to go.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question that he made the right decision to go. If you look at the average career of an NFL running back, what is it, like 3 years, 4 years, something like that? Like what? Another year is not going to. He's not magically going to be the number one running back in the country this time next year, because you're right. He's not going to get a lot of touches. He's going to get, you're probably back to 8-ish carries a game next year, and so you're not going to suddenly have a 2,000-yard Heisman Trophy winning season that's going to vault you to the top 5 of the draft board. So if you're going to go get hit next year, go get paid for it. That's for running backs, that is almost always the answer. Unless you have a serious deficiency in your game, like you really aren't a good blocker, or you've been terrible with fumbles, and you're really at risk of just running yourself out of the league in your first training camp or something like that. I think the answer for a running back is almost always turn pro. I would certainly expect J.K. Dobbins to go pro a year from now. I think that's, barring a real, injury-plagued season or something like that, I would think that he probably goes pro as early as possible. I think that's pretty much always the answer for running backs. There are positions where you're better off staying and getting more reps in college, but running back I don't think is one of them.
No, and they always talk about the tread that you have on the tires, and you need to get there as quickly as possible. But the other thing is, for Mike Weber, it's more important to get that second contract, like it is for all NFL players. It's more important to get that second contract, which is where the real money is, compared to, if he's a 5th round pick, I don't know, maybe $1.5 million for 4 years, with 3 of those years being like the 4th year being the team option or something. It's something in that ballpark. But the second contract is where you make the real money that, helps your family beyond you. And so the sooner you can start that clock, the better. Hello, Tom. Did you see Dwayne Haskins on Instagram when Mike Weber announced that he was leaving? Dwayne Haskins asked him to stay one more year. Why would he ask him to stay one more year unless, of course, Dwayne Haskins is coming back? So that's a pretty big deal breaking right now.
Yeah, I saw that, and I don't think it's going to materially impact what I expect to happen next year. So I think if you rewind the podcast about 3 to 4 minutes to where you're talking about how Matthew Baldwin and Tate Martell are probably going to be stealing snaps from the running backs next year, stealing carries from the running backs next year, I think I have a sense that you probably agree with me on this, that he might be having a little fun with everyone, and probably not genuinely expecting him to be back next year and for Weber to come back and play with him. I think that's probably still a pretty safe guess that he's going pro. It's never official until he says it, so you never know, maybe. But and there are, in some ways, there are studies that show that quarterbacks with more reps as a starter at the college level tend to do better as pros. So there is something of an argument that he could come back and could benefit long-term from coming back to be the starting quarterback another year at Ohio State. It's not like there's no argument there, but he has pretty consistently been showing up in the top 10-ish of NFL draft boards, NFL mock drafts. So if you're going to be a top 10 pick, go get that money.
Well, when I say that Mike Weber is going to be losing carries to Tate Martell, it's because I'm saying Tate Martell is going to beat out Dwayne Haskins.
Oh, okay. Well, then in that case, Dwayne Haskins should definitely go pro before his draft stock plummets next year.
Basically, you're saying Dwayne Haskins should do the Antonio Pittman, because Antonio Pittman left early because he knew he had Beanie Wells behind him. Dwayne Haskins, he sees what's back there, and he's like, you know what? I better just go. It's either that or hold the clipboard next year. And Tom, I think after you throw for 5,000 yards and 50-plus touchdowns in a season, you don't want to hold a clipboard next year.
You know what? If he's going to hold a clipboard next year, go do it. Go do it while getting paid a few $1 million to do it. That's the way to do it. I don't think he would have a huge problem holding a clipboard as long as he's doing it in I don't know. Who in the NFL needs a quarterback? Not the Browns anymore. That was always the standard joke, and all of a sudden they have a quarterback. So I don't know. There you go. Go stand in Cincinnati and hold a clipboard there and learn on the job for a year behind Andy Dalton, I guess.
So that leads us into like who else is leaving, and we'll see where you are on Tom on all of these. I still expect KJ Hill to go.
Yes.
I'm still convinced that Draymond Jones is going to go.
since he told us, yes, I'm going to say that there's a pretty good chance that Draymond Jones. And let me just jump you here. I think Mike Weber goes too. What do you think? Your thoughts?
Oh, well, you know what? I don't know that he's ready. I think he could really use another year to improve. He could get faster. He could get bigger. He could get stronger. He could get more elusive. And really, running backs, you don't really have to worry about how many carries you've had because you last so long. You know, they last so long. Like Emmitt Smith, 26 years in the league. He's still playing today. They last forever.
Okay, so you've made a very convincing case there. How about this one? Nick Bosa. What do you think? Is he coming back next year? Maybe.
Really? Do you really want him back? I mean, the guy quit on the team. He can't stay healthy. At this point, you're better off without him. He's just going to take snaps away from people who deserve it, who want to be Buckeyes, who really want to be part of this team. Like kids from Ohio. This guy, Nick Bosa, can't stay healthy, not from Ohio, quit the team. I don't want him back. He shouldn't come back. Don't even give him a pair of gold pants. What do you think about that?
I feel like we should just be real explicit here about the fact that Gerd is kidding. It's okay. Don't get mad. It's just a joke. Just a joke, friends. Just a joke. Jokes are what we have here. Yeah, I think Nick Bosa, who declared for the NFL draft, probably gone. I think Mike Weber, who declared for the NFL draft, probably gone. Draymond Jones, the same. I'm with you on KJ Hill, and Dwayne Haskins is the fifth one that I think I would be extremely surprised if Dwayne Haskins was back next year. Those are the five that I still think are very, very likely to go / already gone. And there are others that I think are maybe / likely to go, might go / likely to go, but those are the five that I think I would be very surprised if any of those five guys were back next year.
You know what has surprised me, or I guess made me take notice, is the way Malik Harrison is talking about how he's been talking to Jerome Baker about the NFL and the NFL decision, and how he believes he showed in the last few games that he's ready for the NFL. He said he's not thinking about it, but he's talking to Jerome Baker about it. He did not put his name into the NFL advisory board to get feedback, which, as I wrote the other day, that's either because he's not really that serious or because he doesn't care what the NFL is going to say. And if you don't care, then you're already, you pretty much have decided that this is going to be your last year. So I'll be interested to see what he does. Obviously, I don't think he should go. I think another year of being completely solid and adequate all year would be a much wiser decision, because we saw a lot of missed tackles this year. tackles where he was in position and just didn't make them. So I need to talk to some people who know him and get some insight there. But the fact that Tom, he is so seriously looking into it or exploring the possibility, I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up being, how every year or two there's a shocker who leaves. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe that's him this year.
Yeah, I'm with you. He is someone who I think would benefit for another year at Ohio State. And, potentially you're going to have some schematic changes with the linebackers next year, and potentially you've got a different position coach with the linebackers next year. And all of that would probably help him. He had a couple good games at the end of the year, but NFL teams are going to want to see more than just a couple good games. Like, there's a lot of linebackers that have a couple good games of film this year. I think he would benefit greatly from another year at Ohio State. And, you never know exactly what his family situation is. And, so you can't really make a this is the wrong decision kind of thing. But I think that probably long term he would benefit from another year at Ohio State. He's someone who I have on the possibly list, but I don't think you want to leave early and then get picked in the 6th round or something like that. You don't want to do the Jalen Marshall where you probably would have been better off with another year at Ohio State and then set yourself up much better for a longer NFL career by waiting another year, getting another year of experience, and setting yourself up better long term that way.
Malik Harrison is a lot like Jerome Baker in that they're both going to they see the combine as a place where they can shine, and Jerome Baker did that. Malik Harrison will do that. And Malik Harrison even said, talking about Jerome Baker, how he didn't have his best year as a junior, but he knew he would be able to compete in the NFL. And you look at the way the linebackers have struggled this year, and he's probably thinking the same thing. Like, well, yeah, but I'll be better there. I'll show everybody at the combine. So even if I don't have the production this year, although I believe he is a leading tackler, he'll get to the combine and he'll jump high and he'll run fast and he'll be 6'3", 240. He's prototypical in so many different categories, but the consistency has been lacking. But that's the case for all linebackers the last 2 years for whatever reason. We don't know why. Who could say? But yeah, you talk about the possibility of perhaps a new linebacker coach or a new defensive game plan or something like that could really get a lot of these guys to blossom. And now you're talking about, instead of that 6th round guy, you might be Raekwon McMillan, looking early 2nd round, something like that, or James Laurinaitis 2nd round, or somewhere where you are already expected to come in and start, because that's how highly the team thinks of you, and that's the trust and the weight that they're putting on your shoulders, rather than, we're going to bring you in, you'll be a special teams guy, and if you're not very good, we don't have much invested in you, so we can just cut you, and we don't have to worry about you, and we'll just replace you with a 4-year vet off the street. And it's a business there, and they think, the guys at Ohio State think it's a business at Ohio State, and it is to a certain extent. It's a real business there, and there is no, we'll give you 2 more years to figure this out. I talked to Jordan Fuller last week, and he put his name into the advisory board. He said he wasn't leaning one way or the other. He just wanted as much information as possible. He's an academic All-American. You know how they are. They want to know everything. And so that's where Jordan Fuller is. I don't think he's going to get the feedback that he's hoping for, Tom. So I would expect him back. We talk, he's a smart kid, obviously. You would expect him to make a wise decision, but we don't always have the information about those decisions. And maybe a wise decision for him is, now I'm ready to finally, I'm ready to make this my job. And he's a guy like Mike Weber, who maybe is what he is at this point. And even though he's a very good player, he's not Malik Hooker. He's not, maybe he's Von Bell. Von Bell was a 2nd round pick. Maybe he could be that next year. I don't think he's had the year this year that he wanted. And he's even said that. I don't know that he's Tom. I don't know that he's had the year to warrant like a Von Bell pick.
No, I wouldn't think he's a... Didn't Von Bell kind of go at the top of the second round? I feel like he was...
Somewhere around there.
Yeah, I think he was pretty high second round, 40th pick overall or something like that. I don't know that I would expect Fuller to go there, because he's had a good year. He's had a solid year, but he is not someone who is going to light the combine on fire. I mean, you talked about Malik Harrison, maybe being able to do that, and maybe that's enough to overcome just a so-so year on the field. I don't know that Jordan Fuller is the kind of player who's going to just completely jump off the screen at teams at the combine. I do think he's someone who probably could have a pretty good, solid NFL career. He's a very good player, very fundamentally sound player, very smart player, and I think he could have a pretty good NFL career. But another year at Ohio State would probably be a good thing for him. There are guys on this team that I think should jump early, but if you're not a first round pick, if you're not a very high second round pick, and you're not a running back who needs to start cashing checks while he can still cash checks, I think that you in general are probably better off coming back for another year. Because again, like people remember all the guys who left early and had great careers. There are guys who left early and probably look back at that as the biggest mistake they've made in their lives. So, and it's hard. It's a difficult decision because even when they get draft grades back, those are not always where guys end up getting picked. That is not a guarantee that is where you're going to end up. So, you want to end up in a good spot with that first NFL, out of the draft. You want to end up somewhere reasonably high in the draft, because it's a whole lot of 7th round picks get cut, and once you get cut, if you don't get picked up by a team, that's kind of it. You don't have another great option out there. So, you want to make sure you're setting yourself up for success. So I could certainly see Jordan Fuller going. That would not, he's definitely on the list that would not surprise me if he went, but I could certainly see a pretty compelling argument that he might benefit from another year at Ohio State.
As much as Ohio State fans, many of them are ready to move on from Damon Arnett and Kendall Sheffield. And as we've talked about before, both players came into this season expecting it to be their last. Having just recently talked about the lack of cornerbacks in the 2019 class, it might not be a bad thing for at least one of those guys to return. Although I don't expect both of them to go. I don't know who would be the most likely to leave. I think Kendall Sheffield had the better year. Damon Arnett seems like maybe he's just one of those guys. Sheffield as well. It's just time. If you're a 5th-year senior and a starter, a multi-year starter at Ohio State, and you're not on the offensive line, it's almost like you are admitting that you are not an NFL prospect. And I don't think any of those guys want to admit that. And I also think the NFL looks at guys differently, where why aren't you here yet? What has kept you back from getting here? Why did it take you 5 years when you've been starting for 2 or 3 of those years? Maybe you're not. I don't think they like to imagine themselves as not being NFL guys. So it's almost like, well, we'll just go and be NFL guys now. So I don't expect both of them to return. I would probably be more surprised if one of them returned than if neither of them returned. Where you do expect one, two, none to return?
I think I don't have a strong feeling either way on what either one of them is going to do. So I guess I'll say one is going to return, and then I won't be off by more than one that way. I think that you may have hit it where they may have come into the year expecting that this was their last year, and therefore, you have to have a really bad year to talk yourself out of the fact that this is your last year. And I don't know if either of them had a great year. we had talked before the season, and I think our expectation was like one of them is probably going to take the leap and be the next first round NFL cornerback from Ohio State. And neither of them did that. Kendall Sheffield is probably going to test reasonably well. I mean, especially just in terms of straight line speed. Like he's going to run a real fast 40 at the combine. So that would probably at least be a mark in his favor. But I don't know that neither of them check all the boxes that I laid out earlier for these are the guys who should leave early. I don't think either of them are first rounders and neither of them are running backs, but I think that there's a decent chance that one or both will leave just based on they came into the year expecting to leave, and it's hard to change your mind when you have had the I don't know if they've had the countdown on their calendar or been marking the days on their calendar to I signed my first NFL contract in 150 days or whatever it is, and then I'm going to be a millionaire. That's probably hard to reset that countdown another 365 days if you've, really had your eyes on that. And, again, there are external factors that we don't know with either of those guys where, maybe there are family members who are pressuring them to go because they need, they want to cash in on that. Or maybe there's, maybe there's a medical situation or maybe there's a family situation. You never know exactly what's going on behind the scenes with guys. So you don't want to judge decisions too harshly because they obviously have a lot more information than you or I do to weigh what they're going to do. And obviously this is a much higher stakes decision for them than it is for either of us. So that's worth considering as well.
When you say don't judge them too harshly, you don't mean like people on the internet, right?
No, I mean, obviously not. No one on the internet is going to judge them harshly. And yes, and when I was speaking to you earlier, I may have been speaking to other people who are listening, but that's who's to say. Right now, as far as I know, you and I are the only people listening to this. We're just talking right now, so I don't know who else I would have been talking to.
Well, I want you to not lay laws down for people who like to comment on players' lives, because who are you, Tom, to limit what or say that somebody can't say something about somebody? This is America. We have freedom of speech last time I checked. And if I want to rip on a player for turning his back on my school, yeah, I'm going to do it. And I don't care about his family because he clearly doesn't care about my family. And if I ever see him at Kroger and he wants to cut in line, I'll be like, no, you left for the NFL. You're dead to me. I won't let you in line. And why can't you just go to a different register? Mr. NFL, Mr. I hate Ohio State now. Screw these guys. Get them out of here. We don't got time for that.
If you let a current player cut in line, would that constitute an extra benefit? I'm not sure. That might be an NCAA violation. So maybe you shouldn't let players cut in line now either. I'm not sure. You have to talk to compliance about that.
As long as you let other college kids cut in line. Oh no, I hate those college kids. I don't let any of them cut in line. They're so smug and they're so loud with their scooters and their rock music.
Oh, we are college football's oldest podcast for sure. And we will thank you, friends, to get off of our lawn.
Do you want to just get to questions?
Let's do that. First one from @B Schneider_13. I love your work as always. Thank you, B Schneider 13. We love you as well. I am out of reasons the Buckeyes benefit by being in the Big Ten. The Big Ten needs Ohio State more than Ohio State needs the Big Ten. On the surface, joining the SEC would make a lot of sense for both parties. I'd be curious to hear your take on the pod.
This should be more. This is something that should be written about so that we can place our thoughts more cleanly and totally troll Ohio State fans by saying, yes, they should go to the SEC. Put them in the SEC East because you don't want to be in the SEC West. It's too hard, facing the likes of Ole Miss, Mississippi State. Nobody wants that. That's too much. Put them in the East. I think they'd be okay. But I don't know why being in the Big Ten is a bad thing, because they're getting paid $45 million a year, and they're building all kinds of buildings. If you've been to campus at any point in the last 10 years, there's all kinds of buildings going up because of the money that's being brought in by cable. I don't know what the benefit of going to the SEC would be, other than we all like to feel smart.
We wouldn't have to go to Rutgers next year. That would be something.
But you know what? Well, the drives are going to be much longer in the SEC, though.
That's true. That's true. I mean, the short version of this is no, they're not going to leave the Big Ten because they have all sorts of historical ties to the conference, and there are all sorts of academic reasons. Like, just from a purely football standpoint, like you could make some kind of an argument to that degree, but or to that point, but it's not going to happen because you have the historical ties. Conferences have what's called a grant of rights for their media, which I don't remember how long the Big Ten's is, but if Ohio State just packed up and left the Big Ten tomorrow, the Big Ten owns their media rights for, I don't know, it's through 2024, 2025 or something like that, 2023, something like that. So whatever Ohio State got for their media rights the next 5 years would just go straight to the Big Ten anyway. So, and then, then you're presumably under this scenario leaving Michigan behind. So are you getting rid of the Michigan game? Are you, is Michigan coming with you? I'm sorry. I just thought about the Michigan being in the SEC and what they would think about their conference brethren in the SEC, and just from an academic standpoint alone. And boy, I don't think that would go over real big in Ann Arbor. So it is an interesting thought exercise, and from a purely football trying to win a national championship angle, there's an argument for it, but it won't happen for any number of other reasons that, that in the eyes of the decision makers are going to far, far trump any football considerations.
And the playoff will be here anyway.
Yeah, exactly. If football was the only consideration, you would not have added Rutgers to the Big Ten. You would not have added Maryland to the Big Ten. Like, there were much better football programs to add, but those are the programs that got added to the Big Ten because there were all sorts of considerations that went beyond just the football end of things. So that gives you some sense for how the decision makers are making their decisions and what they're basing them on. So I think that's probably a decent guide for how they would think about a potential Ohio State conference switch.
If Ohio State did leave for the SEC, though, I would be in favor of that, because instantly I would print out shirts in maize and blue saying, "We chased Ohio State out of the Big Ten." And I would make millions from selling them to Michigan fans who would believe this.
Can't wait for Ohio State's new regular season ending rivalry against border state Kentucky. Oh man, gonna be amazing. It's gonna be. Can you imagine Ohio State playing every Saturday after Thanksgiving against a team from a bordering state wearing blue and just winning every year? Like, what would that even be like? I can't even imagine. It
would get boring after a while. Although if it was Kentucky every year, Tom, like, we'd be in the press box at Ohio Stadium and they'd be like, attendance today, 74,626. Nobody wants to see Kentucky.
A new Kentucky Stadium record. The only difference would be, instead of the opposing fan base talking crap about something that happened in 1894 or something like that, instead Kentucky would just be talking about basketball, and so it would just be a different kind of annoying, irrelevant football conversation with your rival school. So I don't think you're solving anything.
Michigan fans are doing that now, just talking basketball.
So you're saying that Michigan is basically the Kentucky of the Big Ten?
I think we have decided that. Although, yeah, I mean, even this year, they both like 9 wins, something like that. Have to rely on Ohio players to be good at anything. So, yeah, interesting. Mental note. Put that one away.
And both head coaches have a brother who's much better at their jobs than they are.
It's like they're mirror images.
So Are you going to, while I'm editing the podcast, are you going to write is the Michigan and the Kentucky of the SEC or the Big Ten article and post it tonight? Because I think you probably should.
It is technically Monday. I can do a Michigan Monday here in the next couple of hours.
Kentucky Cunday. It's gonna be a change, but we'll make it work.
Gotta be careful with that one, Tom.
All right, so I don't think we're gonna top that question, but we'll try. Next one from @Aaron J. Wenzel. Over under 1.5 70+ yard touchdown runs for Myles Gaskin in the Rose Bowl. And I was all ready to talk about this whenever we started talking about the Rose Bowl, because I would bet the over on 0.5. That's for sure.
Yeah, he's got 2 40-yard runs this year and 1 70-yard run. And plus, as we know, Tom, the Ohio State defense is playing much better now because that's what they say. And we've seen it by the fact that the Buckeyes have only given up 39 and 24 points in the last 2 games, which is pretty outstanding. But yeah, 1.5 is, I'm going to go under that. You might get 1.5 though. I don't know if that's possible, but like a 70-yarder and then a 35-yarder, and they'll fumble and somebody else will take it the rest of those 35 yards.
Yeah, I could see, I think at least 1 long run is a pretty good guess, but I don't think you're going to see 2. I can't remember how many times they got hit for multiple 70+ yard touchdowns by one player in the same game, especially on the ground. It seems like a lot of the big plays happen in the passing game. Maryland did. Yeah, Maryland did. But I don't know if it happened any other time other than that, because I'm just thinking back, and it seems like most of the big plays were through the air this year. So yeah, I'll take the under.
Once is bad enough.
All right. Next one from @info348788048.
I made sure to get that exactly right too.
Question: how do I get a shorter Twitter name? No, sorry, that should be the question. Actual question: what about the quotes I read, forget where, that Bill Davis is coming back? Did he say / mean he plans to come back, or that he is coming back?
Well, and what this is coming from is one 2020 recruit, and I don't remember who it was, saying that Bill Davis told him he'll be back. That's a 2020 kid, and you can tell him whatever you want. If you turn out that you're not going to be back, there's plenty of time to repair that. And I'm not going to assume Bill Davis is back based on one recruit being told by him that he'll be back, because I'm sure that's what he's supposed to be saying to. You can't be definitive about these things, and the way you can say things could be interpreted another way by a player. We see that all the time. The telephone game or the operator game, where what you say isn't exactly what they hear and what they repeat, and there's going to be differences there. So Bill Davis said, I may have said yeah, I plan to be here. That's my intention. And then the player said, yeah, Bill Davis said he's going to be here. I would be surprised if he is back, though. I don't know that there's, without being too, not cruel, but definitive, or I'm not a football coach, but it doesn't seem like the linebackers have played well since he's been here. And I don't know that that's how Ryan Day would like to start out his Ohio State program.
I'm going to skip a question and skip ahead to @eBronsty, who says, what will it say about Ryan Day if Bill Davis is retained?
Tom?
That he values continuity. And I don't know what else it would say, because I haven't seen a picture of Ryan Day's wedding. So I couldn't say for sure if there were broader implications there, but
it would say that he likes a damn fine speech.
Could be. At the Real Spray Tan, and Real is REEL. At the Real Spray Tan, when Harrison commits to Michigan on Wednesday, what should the level of outrage be for Ohio State fans like myself?
Remember, the outrage should never be at the coaches. It should always be at the teenagers. All right? Tom, please.
Hey, remember earlier when I said we needed to point out to everyone that Gerd was joking? Friends, Gerd is joking again.
Yes. Yes. Don't ever get
Don't at the recruits.
Yeah. But these teenagers today, they're just so cocky, and they don't let me like walk on their side of the street, or they throw things at me. I just don't like these kids today, Tom, especially the teenagers, the kids in college, the kids out of college, the 30-year-olds, the mid 30-year-olds, the upper 30-year-olds, and the people who just turned 40. All of them. Can't stand them. What's the question?
You're just mad because because Harrison is potentially going to announce right during Matlock. So, I mean, that's going to be tough timing.
You expect me to stay up until 12 p.m. to watch a commitment?
The actual answer here is low to none. I mean, this is a very unusual recruitment. This is a kid who is not necessarily making a decision based on the stuff that a lot of other recruits might make a decision based on. This is a little bit like Jackson Carman. This is 2 years in a row where you have a player who's the top-ranked player in the state who potentially wants to leave the state and might want to get away from home a little bit. And, you cannot, individual players, it is very difficult to blame coaches for what one individual player does. If I was a college football recruit, I grew up on the East Coast. I chose to go to school in Ohio because I wanted to go to school somewhere far away from home. So if Jim Calhoun had been recruiting me to play basketball at UConn and I had gone out of state, that would not have necessarily been Jim Calhoun's fault. I didn't even look at UConn. I didn't want to go to UConn. I wanted to go somewhere else. I wanted to go, I wanted to get away from home for college. So that was not Jim Calhoun's fault that I did not go to UConn. So similarly, I think if Zach Harrison ends up wanting to go somewhere else and get, he supposedly is not real big on the spotlight. And if you look at his, how he has comported himself throughout his recruiting process, I think that has been borne out pretty clearly by what he has, how he has handled his recruiting process and hasn't really talked to people and has kept everything very private and locked down. So, if he goes somewhere else, he goes somewhere else, and that's his decision, and life will go on for the Ohio State football program. They will still play football at Ohio State next fall. If Zach Harrison is there, great. If Zach Harrison is not, that's okay. It'll be fine.
Plus, Tom, in your UConn example, we all know that you committed on your official visit to Louisville.
I don't want to talk about why. Yeah, sorry. Deron Sheffer took my scholarship. What a jerk. Little
kind of thing? That's a good pull right there.
Little mid-90s UConn. Yeah. They had already hit their quota of white guys, so it was him and Travis Knight, and then they were full, so I had to go to Ohio State. And I will have Randy Ayers was happy to have me. All right, next one.
He was happy to have anybody by the end. So, like Jamie Bosley, Damon Stringer.
Yeah, I didn't break into any cars in a parking garage, so I was the best player on the team. Next one from Buck Mish. What happened to Antoine Jackson at defensive tackle?
Well, here's what I think, Tom. And when he was at Auburn, there was questions about his effort. He gets to Ohio State. Well, first he goes to, I believe, Blinn Junior College, was an All-American there. Gets to Ohio State already on a broken foot in the winter. Deals with that during the winter and into the spring. And is really just behind everybody. And you're looking at guys like Teron Vincent and Tommy Togiai as in his same class, but they're true freshmen and they've bypassed him. You got Haskell Garrett behind Draymond Jones and Robert Landers and Devon Hamilton at nose tackle and Vincent and Tommy Togiai behind them. That's like four guys at one position. And what position is there room for a fifth guy other than like wide receiver? But we're talking like, who's the fifth X? Who's the fifth H? We didn't see DeMario McCall until the end of the year. We didn't see CJ Saunders or Jalen Gill, who would be like the fifth H. So there really wasn't a lot of room for him. Plus, I still think there's some effort issues that he just has to learn to work harder, be more what everybody else is, and the effort that gets you onto the field regardless of depth. Like Nick Bosa came here with 3 NFL guys in front of him, and it didn't matter because he's talented, and the effort matched his talent. And so even though he is in a position of depth, if he was worth, or if his play was worthy of getting snaps, Tom, he would have gotten some.
Right. And Ohio State has the be a 5 thing where, you're a 0 or you're a 1 or you're a 2. And it's an effort thing. It's a, focus thing and all of that. And so that is something that they really do stress. So, we don't have, coaches haven't come out and explicitly said that publicly, but that is certainly something that they weigh when they talk about players and playing time and earning the right to be on the field and all that kind of stuff. But you're right. The depth chart is really, it's not like there's not other good options there. And we have the next question. I'll just read the next question too, because the answer is kind of the same. From Board at Work, what's up with Jerron Cage at defensive tackle, 4-star recruit buried on the depth chart? It's the same thing. At the 3 tech, you've got Draymond Jones, Haskell Garrett, Teron Vincent, and then Antoine Jackson. At the nose, you got Robert Landers, Davon Hamilton, Tommy Togiai, and Jerron Cage. It's not like Jerron Cage is a 4-star recruit who is buried behind a bunch of walk-ons. Jerron Cage is sitting and on the depth chart behind a bunch of other good 4-star and 5-star recruits. This is not a everyone was a superstar in high school, and then you come to Ohio State, and then you're on a team full of guys who were superstars in high school, and then now how are you going to differentiate yourself now? And Jerron Cage still has another couple of years. Jerron Cage is not running out of time to play at Ohio State, so he has if Draymond Jones leaves, that's one spot that's going to open up, and you have he was behind Tommy Togiai this year, but Tommy Togiai was an impact player immediately, and someone who, I think the coaches saw as a very, very special player, one of the premier players in the country. And at the other tackle position, Teron Vincent, again, 5-star player, son of an NFL star, and a potential early impact guy. Being behind those guys does not necessarily mean you're not a good football player. It just means you're behind other very, very good football players. Jerron Cage, I think Jerron Cage will, if he stays at Ohio State, I think Jerron Cage ultimately ends up being a contributing player for Ohio State, right?
Yeah, and remember, this was the first year the Rushman package featured a defensive tackle. So it's also the snaps available to defensive tackles in general are less than are available to defensive ends. And when Draymond Jones leaves after this year, will there be 4 defensive ends in the Rushman again? We saw Tyreek Smith in there, and does Tyler Friday get in there, or do they find a pass rushing defensive tackle who is worthy of being in there? Is that Teron Vincent, who had a sack against Northwestern? Is there going to be somebody on the interior who is worthy of being in there on third downs? I don't expect it to be Cage or Jackson because they're different types of defensive tackles, but it's tough enough when you're behind, when you've got Robert Landers and Davon Hamilton who aren't going anywhere, but they're going to be 5th-year seniors next year. So they've been entrenched. Robert Landers has been the 1 or 2. It'll be all 4 years that he's at Ohio State or that he's been playing. He redshirted. So it's sometimes it's just tough to get ahead of those guys who have been there forever and who do everything that is asked of them. And really, to get on the field, that's what you've got to do. You've got to do everything that is being asked of you, and you've got to execute. Then even still, when you're doing that, it's like, well, yeah, but Robert Landers does it better. So now you're kind of screwed. And that's where the defensive tackles are right now.
All right, next one, and this is my favorite question of the week and maybe of the month. This is really an interesting question. Who will be here longer, Chris Holtman or Ryan Day? That's from Buck the World. I have an opinion on this, but I'm really interested in what yours is.
Well, here's the thing. Because you have to look at it like who's going to be more successful, or if they're both the same level of success, like very successful. Ohio State football is not a place you leave unless you want to go to the NFL. Ohio State basketball could be a place you leave to go to another college program. So if we're going to assume both are successful, and I think we both agree that Chris Holtmann is successful, as evidenced by how much we talk about the basketball program on this podcast, we'll get there eventually, folks. Trust us. But Ryan Day, if we expect him to be as successful as an Ohio State coach should be, and what that means is based on the last 5 coaches or whatever, Hall of Famer. I lean with Ryan Day being here longer than Chris Holtmann because I'm assuming the success will stay high for both. And as you know, like whenever Kentucky would open up or these jobs where people would be like, "Is Thad Matta going to take this job?" I could see Chris Holtmann, Kentucky, Duke is eventually going to open up. You know, there are going to be places that open up where he, at this point, looks like he's going to be one of the top young coaches that programs will look at to take over their program. So I, believing that Ryan Day will win, I'm going to go with Ryan Day.
See, that is fascinating because I went completely the other direction with my thought process and my result. So I'm looking at this from the old Thad Matta point of view, which is Ohio State is a program where you can win a national championship. Ohio State is also a program where you don't have the completely insane pressure of a Kentucky or a Duke, where you have the resources, you have the recruiting base, you have everything you need where you can win a national championship at Ohio State in basketball. Thad Matta got real close. If you assume that if Chris Holtmann views this as a destination job, I think the answer is Chris Holtmann, because you looked at it from the what if they're both great. I looked at it as what if they're both good. They're not amazing, but they're both good. Chris Holtmann, there's less pressure to be a top 5 team in basketball than there is football. If Chris Holtmann has this as a consistent Sweet 16 team, I think he could be here from now until the end of time. If Ryan Day has this as a top 15 college football program, at some point it takes one bad year after a string of 10-2, 9-3s. It takes one 8-4 season to be out of a job at Ohio State. I think that's, you can argue whether or not that's fair, but I think that may be how things play out. You have one, John Cooper in the 90s. John Cooper had an 11-win season in 94 or 95. He had a 12-win season in 96, a 10-win season in 97, a 12-win season in 98. And then he went 6-6 and 8-4, I believe, and then was out of a job. I think that you can, if Chris Holtmann wants to stay at Ohio State forever and just is a consistently good to very good team and not a consistent national championship contender, not a consistent Final Four kind of team, I think he could be at Ohio State forever. And I think there's probably some appeal to a slightly less pressure, all the resources you needed, getting paid like you are a top 5, top 10 kind of coach. Like if you can make $4 million a year or whatever he makes and have the opportunity to win a national championship, but not be in a complete pressure cooker where you feel like your head's going to explode every day, I think that might be appealing enough that he just stays there forever. If he, and I think if he can win 20-ish, 25 games a year, 20 to 25 games every year, I think he would have the opportunity to stay there forever.
Yeah, it just depends on his mentality because I believe he originally told Ohio State no, which tells you that he was happy at Butler. So he can be happy at Ohio State. Who do you want to be the guy that replaces Coach K, or do you want to wait till that guy fails and then will Duke even will continue to be Duke after Coach K? If Holtmann can find happiness in being the B team, or like not necessarily at a basketball school, because there is so many positives, because you have all of the resources and none of the pressure, but much less of the pressure. And the only thing that brought that Mata down was the recruiting that led to poor results. Like, if he was just continuing to win 24 games every year, people would be fine. I mean, he's in the rafters now. It doesn't take a lot to make Ohio State basketball fans happy. Now, they're not going to come to the game and watch. Let's not go crazy. But it's a program where you can stay forever and just continue to do what you do. But I just have this feeling that Holtmann is like a superstar, and maybe he's Brad Stevens, where he's not even going to go to another college program. He's just going to go to the NBA. But you know what? We'll probably be talking back here in 3 years, and Ryan Day will have been fired. Holtmann will be, 15-win team in the last couple of years, and we'll be like, remember that conversation we were having about who's going to be here longer, and because they're both great and they're both awesome, and now like we're talking about two homeless dudes.
I think we need to talk about their money management if they're homeless in a few years. They are still making a decent amount of money between now and then. So regardless of how things go. So last one from Buckeye Hotep. Does Ryan Day have an actual chance to be Big Ten Coach of the Year?
The answer is yes. And he will become the second Ohio State head coach to have an actual chance to win the Big Ten Coach of the Year in at least the last 20 years. And the first one would have been Luke Fickell. And then, like, if he had gone 11-1 or 10-2 or 12-0 that year, then you have to give it to him because the expectations were not high. Here, Tom, I believe he has a chance because this is going to be his first impression. This is going to be, like the statement. I mean, he's got 3 games as a head coach under his belt total. So he's essentially a rookie coach. That means like the expectations for him, like Ohio State's expectations will always penalize or handicap a coach. But like he's at the bottom of the totem pole on wins. And that's even, Minnesota, Indiana, like all of these coaches have more wins than Ryan Day. Now, they don't have his winning percentage. Can't do better than perfect. But I do believe, now it might take a 12-0 season, but I think he could win Big Ten Coach of the Year next year. I think he has not been eliminated like Urban Meyer was as soon as he arrived.
I don't think he can win it next year, but he might be able to win it a couple of years from now. Because I think that if Ohio State goes 12-0 next year, I think the national narrative is going to be, well, yes, but he's doing it with Urban Meyer's players. So it doesn't really, how anyone could win with Urban Meyer's players. I think that if he goes 10-2 for a couple of years, or say they go 10-2 in 2019 and 9-3 in 2020, and then they go 12-0 in 2021, then I think there's a decent chance. But I think you probably need to have a little bit of separation between here and there before people are really willing to give him the benefit of the doubt and say, okay, this really was him doing it and not just him stepping into Urban Meyer's shoes and just continuing to run Urban Meyer's program, because Urban Meyer's program very clearly is not enough to get you a Big Ten Coach of the Year award. So yeah, maybe he can, but it's probably going to take a couple of years, I think.
So you're saying like maybe go 3-9 next year to lower the expectations, and then 10-2, boom, you got it.
I think that's probably the safest thing for him to do career-wise. I think definitely go 3-9 next year, and then only good things can happen to you if you go 3-9 as an Ohio State coach.
Like, imagine Rich Rod, they went 3-9 in 2008. If he wins 9 or 10 games in 2009, he's coach of the year, right?
I mean, yes, but you know who really screwed him out of that? Terrell Pryor.
Who, by the way, should have his name up inside Ohio Stadium.
Maybe Terrell Pryor should have been the Big Ten Coach of the Year. Think about that. And, well, maybe Tate Martell will be in 2019.
with all of the read option that he's going to be doing, he's pretty much going to be like the offensive coordinator and coach of that offense. So I could see at least one voter writing him in. Wink, wink. And that voter would then lose his opportunity to vote ever again.
But I think it would totally be worth it, though.
Totally be worth it. I made my statement. I stand by it. A redshirt sophomore should be coach of the year. Why not?
We should real quickly address some breaking news, which is only breaking for us. Justin, you who are listening to this have heard this a day and a half before, but Georgia quarterback Justin Fields is apparently transferring, and rumors, of course, that he may be interested in Ohio State. He looked at Ohio State kind of early in the process. If I remember right, he started looking at Ohio State and then committed to Penn State and then ended up at Georgia. So, I guess he would have to sit next year and could play in 2020. So
Oklahoma is also Oklahoma and Ohio State have been the two teams mentioned most with him, which you would understand based on what you've just seen.
Yeah.
And that's gosh, with signing day coming up, and that might cause some. I guess you would. Would he have to wait until after signing day so that you can get your guys locked in? Like if he wants to come to your school, you're like, just hold on. We've got this one 5-star guy that also wants to come in. Let us get him signed first, and then you could come over.
Yeah, I would guess that it's not going to be an immediate process for him. So probably before, at least before, you could maybe do it before the February signing day, but. Yeah, you're not gonna have a verdict on that before the December signing day, which is about 36 hours from when he announced he was going to transfer. Probably not gonna have a decision that quickly. And
Justin Fields is a true freshman this year. Last summer, he basically destroyed everybody in the camps and was the clear cut, by some estimates, best quarterback in the nation. Although Clemson, Trevor Lawrence, Clemson freshman, was also a once-in-a-lifetime quarterback prospect, but Fields really impressed a lot of people last year, which was why it was probably a good thing for the rest of the Big Ten that he decommitted from Penn State and went to Georgia behind a freshman quarterback that took the Bulldogs to the national championship game, which, Tom, come on.
I mean, if you could get him for 1 year, if you could get Justin Fields for 1 year, what do you think? Because if he comes... He doesn't play 2019. He plays 2020 and then maybe declares for the NFL. Is that worth it? Is that worth taking him, tying up a scholarship for 2 years for 1 year with him? What do you think?
Well, it's going to piss off the other quarterbacks.
It is. It sure is.
So there's that. They'll have the head start, obviously, and then it's a competition again. But you figure... with Tate Martell and Matthew Baldwin, they're going to compete this year. They'll probably compete next year. You throw another guy, DeJuan Mathis as well will be in there. You throw another guy in there. It's going to be a competition anyway. It feels more like this would be kind of a mercenary thing where anytime you bring in somebody like this, it's almost like the coaches don't believe in you, whereas you expect recruits to come in every year. That's just a part of the process. To bring in somebody in your class or, 1 year below you after you've been here for a couple of years, it seems like it could feel like they're trying to replace you. And then you wonder, what does that do with Jack Miller, the 2020 kid? Does that then put him off? But if Fields is only going to be around for a year, then it probably wouldn't affect him. But yeah, if he only plays 1 year and then goes pro, that's not a lot to put on tape, but Cardale Jones should have done that after the 2014 season. If we're talking about getting the best contract possible. Tom, we could spend some time this summer on this, maybe. Probably not, though.
When we have more than 7 minutes of notice that it's happened and can actually think it through, yes, that would probably be the good way to do it. That's not how we chose to do it, but it would be probably the more intelligent way to do it.
If he is the best quarterback of, say he's one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the last 10 years, you probably don't care what the rest of your quarterbacks on the team think, right?
Right. I mean, this is is it worth having Dwayne Haskins if you only have him for 1 year kind of conversation, which I think the answer to that would be yes. So is it worth having, if you have a reasonably high confidence that Justin Fields would be that kind of a difference making quarterback, then that's probably worth it. But you're to get to that point, you're assuming all sorts of stuff about what Justin Fields wants to do, where Justin Fields wants to go, and whether Ohio State would be interested in him, because he may want to come in and be guaranteed a starting job in 2020, and I don't think that's something Ohio State would be willing to do. So maybe that's something that other programs would be willing to do. I don't know, but I don't think that's something Ohio State would want to do. I'm just thinking through, like, Penn State. You've got McSorley's gone after this year. You've got Tommy Stevens next year. Tommy Stevens might be a senior next year, so maybe they would pretty much guarantee him the starting job in 2020 if Tommy Stevens is going to be their quarterback next year and then graduate. You've got an opening in 2020. With Ohio State, that's not necessarily the case, because I think Penn State has one more pretty good quarterback recruit that they signed last year, but I'm completely blanking on his name. Was it Phil Jerkovich, or did he go to Notre Dame?
He went to Notre Dame.
He went to Notre Dame, yeah. Again, this would be a great conversation to have if we were properly prepared, but we're not, so here we are.
Can I point you towards a November 19th Twitter exchange between Dwayne Haskins and Justin Fields, where Dwayne Haskins tweets out some stats from the SEC, a tweet from the SEC where it says Justin Fields was 5 for 8 passing for 121 yards and 2 touchdowns and 100 yards rushing on 7 carries. Named the freshman of the week, and Dwayne Haskins tweets at him, "I see you, little bro." And then Justin Fields responds, "Appreciate it. Just trying to get like you." If that's not a verbal commitment to possibly think about maybe down the road transferring and then also having that destination in mind, Tom, I don't know what is.
I mean, so I think we can just say confirmed Justin Fields to Ohio State. That's now pretty much a lock now. Is that what I'm hearing?
I think so. Now people must credit us.
And Sean Clifford was the quarterback I was trying to think of, the 2017
Cincinnati.
class from Cincinnati. Yes, I knew there was a kid that they got that was a pretty highly recruited. He was the number 8 pro style quarterback in 2017. So he's no slouch and probably in line to be their starter after Tommy Stevens.
Tom, should you give the for the 4th time today the caveat that we are joking?
Wait, you're joking?
Yes, that's a real tweet, but I don't think it means that he's coming to Ohio State just yet.
Should I not have published the Justin Fields confirmed to Ohio State story on the front page? Was that a mistake?
Are people clicking on it?
I would certainly have to assume so. So then I guess no.
Let it ride.
Yeah.
Let it ride. All right. We're not in the business of facts. We are in the business of info.
So click on our true stories more often, and we will keep bringing them to you.
Anything else breaking at this time?
No, I'm going to get off of Twitter so that I don't have any more information to derail us, so we can let the nice people get on with their lives. And then, golly, the next time we do this, we might be in Pasadena. How exciting!
That will be the plan. Next week, I guess we'll just let you know. Christmas week, we won't have the regular show Wednesday morning, but we'll do something. We arrive in LA Wednesday afternoon, so we'll do something then. And remember, in California, I don't know if you guys know this, it's 3 hours difference than Ohio. I just found this out. So our time there when we're doing stuff, it's going to be later for you guys. Please don't give us a hard time about that. We're going to do stuff at our pace, at our leisure. All right. And just put up with it. But so we'll do something Wednesday afternoon-ish from there. And then we'll probably do something every day, actually. It may not be 2 hours every day. Tom, is that correct?
I certainly hope it's not 2 hours every day. That will really put a cramp on the rest of our editorial calendar. But, we can, and by rest of our editorial calendar, I mean Gerd going down to the media hospitality suite. But Yeah, I think the plan is to not do 2 hours a night, but we'll see. It's the Rose Bowl. You never know.
You never know. So yeah, look forward to that, and make sure to check out the rest of the shows, as always, on the Ozone Radio Network. Check out the content, as always. We appreciate the reviews. I sent out some address requests for books as thank yous for reviewing the show. So these are real things that we do. It's not just promises that are never fulfilled. Sometimes they are fulfilled. So that's pretty cool. I can't promise that it'll be fulfilled next time. I'm sorry. So thank you all for listening. We will talk to you from California next time we talk to you. That's amazing. I've never been. I hope there are no earthquakes. I hope there is no Godzilla. And please don't be no Godzilla. What? That's a rational fear.
Well, she threw away the motel key. I wish it never meant nothing to me. Say well, now say well. Oh yeah. Say well, now say well. If you tell me that tomorrow's alright, we could steal a car and leave.